Get up guys, this video is going to be the important video in the series of gastrointestinal morphologies, and here we are going to cover the three major topics. One of them is Barret Esophagus and two others are the esophageal carcinomas. So let's get started. Our first topic is the Barret Esophagus. So it is actually defined as the intestinal metaplasia within the esophageal squamous mucosa. So let me brief this. It is actually the change, the intestinal change, which is the normal epithelium of esophagus, which is the squamous epithelium, is converted into the intestinal epithelium, which is the columnar epithelium with goblet cells due to some kind of subject like food particle or some kind of drink that is irritating the normal mucosa of esophagus. So this change in response to that kind of irritating substance is known as the Barret esophagus. Now let's see the gross features of this Barret esophagus. So this is the normal endoscopic view of the opening of stomach. You can see this is a junction between the stomach and esophagus, the cardiac junction. You can see the color and the shape of this junction, which is smooth and pale red in appearance. But in Barret esophagus, it can be converted into some kind of red velvety mucosa which is extending upward from the gastroesophageal junction. So it is extending from this gastroesophageal junction to upward of esophagus, and it is red velvety in appearance. So this is a gross appearance of this Barret esophagus. Under the microscope, we can see that this is the normal epithelium of esophagus, which we have described in detail in our histology sections. And here we will discuss only the important part of this histology. So this is the normal stratified squamous epithelium of esophagus. Look at this is a normal one, this thick epithelium. But when there is constant exposure of this epithelium to some kind of irritating substance like some kind of hot beverages like hot tea, this epithelium can convert in response to that irritating substance into something new which can easily repel the irritating behavior of that substance. And that something new is actually the formation of new epithelium, which is intestinal epithelium, which contains the columnar cells and goblet cells. Here look at this is the new epithelium with tall columnar cells and goblet cells, a lot of mucus inside them. And this mucus can be released in response to that irritating substance, which can provide the protective layer on this surface of esophagus. So this is the histology of Barret esophagus. Also look below the belt. You can see that there is no any kind of change in mucosa and submucosa of this Barret esophagus. So this means that dysplasia may or may not be present. Now let's compare this illustration of Barret esophagus with the real histological slide of this subject. Here you see, this one here is the normal stratified squamous epithelium of esophagus, and deep down here you will find this epithelium is changed into something, the thin covering that contains the tall columnar cells with a lot of goblet cells in between them. So this thinning of epithelium with tall columnar cells is actually the intestinal columnar epithelium, and this is called the intestinal metaplasia. And look at this one, remaining of cells down in the mucosa is normal, and there may or may not be any kind of dysplasia found here. So this was all about the Barret esophagus morphology you need to know. Now let's move to the second topic, the adenocarcinoma of esophagus. Now let's look at its gross features. It is actually located in distal third of esophagus. Remember, it is located in the distal third of esophagus. So it is present almost near the site of Barret esophagus. In fact, the Barret esophagus can be converted into adenocarcinoma of esophagus. Very important. So early lesions are actually the flat patches, but the late lesions are raised exophytic masses that can block the opening of esophagus, which can cause dysphagia. and later on it can be converted into the ulcerating mass, and it can invade deeply and can spread to the nearby tissues. That is what is called the typical malignant carcinoma. Now let's see the microscopic features of this adenocarcinoma of esophagus. So anywhere you see the word adeno in histology, you will find there is present of abundant glands. One word, glands. So there is formation of back-to-back glands inside this adenocarcinoma, and this tumor may produce a lot of mucins through these glands. So these are the back-to-back glands in this adenocarcinoma, and look at this. This is the surface dysplastic cells and a lot of mucin production, which is acting as a covering on the surface of this dysplastic cells. So this was the second important morphology we have discussed now. Now let's move to the third and the last morphology, which is very important in this regard, and this is the squamous cell carcinoma of esophagus. So starting from the gross features, you have to be precisely remember that the location of this squamous cell carcinoma is the middle third of esophagus. Note that again, it is located in the middle third of esophagus. Very important. You need to know that. So it is actually not related to the Barret esophagus. It is a separate thing, and early on it looked like the grayish plaque which act as a thickening, and in the later stage it can convert from plaque into the polypoidal mass that can obstruct the lumen, and this can cause the dysphagia and vomiting. But in the very late stage, it can invade inside of the esophagus and the nearby structure such as trachea, typical of a malignant carcinoma. And you have to remember that it can infiltrate diffusely in ulcerative manner, and it can cause increased rigidity of esophagus. So now let's move to the microscopic features. So in the microscopic picture, we can find the keratin pulse typical of a squamous cell carcinoma, then the nest of malignant cells in undifferentiated tumor, and it can metastasis by lymphatics to the nearby structure. So look at this illustration. So these are the nest of malignant cells which are actually undifferentiated cells, and it can invade the mucosa of esophagus. You can see that clearly, and on the surface we can find the dysplastic surface cells, and there is almost no any kind of esophageal gland in this histology. Actually it is not found in this squamous cell carcinoma, and you can see clearly these are the keratin pulse which are typically found in the squamous cell carcinoma, whether it is of squamous cell carcinoma of skin or esophagus or anywhere else, but we can find the keratin pulse always there. So now let's compare it with the real histological slide of squamous cell carcinoma. You can see this is the stratified squamous epithelium, which is a normal epithelium of esophagus, and this is the beast. Here you see these are the dysplastic squamous cells on the surface, and below that we can find the keratin pulse in this slide. It can infiltrate deep into the mucosa, but in this slide it doesn't invade too much except of this portion, but it is clearly enough to remember the facts we have talked about in this section. So this was all about the three major disorders of esophagus we have covered in single one video. Stay with us and don't miss out the next important chapters of this GIT morphology. Until next time.